Yes, we're on. Splendid. Somebody asked about making chairside insoles, or rather not insoles which are chairside, insoles which are made away from clinic, but not custom, sort of customised if you like. The question was, how would you make one to offload a corn on a 4th met head, assuming that you have a basic grinder, a Dremel, and you're using a full length insole. This is a Slimflex Kinetic. The one that was being asked about was a full-length Slimflex Simple, which would be a little thicker and a little denser. This stuff is actually quite squodgy, so I wouldn't necessarily use this technique with this one, but anyway. In terms of offloading, there's a big consideration, there's a big choice to make in terms of how you offload an MPJ lesion, and it is the intermetatarsal stability. Although we see the forefoot as a solid block, it is of course made up of 5 metatarsals which can move independently of one another, depending on how good the intermetatarsal ligaments, the lumbricals and all sorts of other things are. Some of them you will find you can actually move the met head up and down, you can deviate the mets very easily, and if it's like that, a met cutout pad, the classic U pad, isn't actually going to work very well because the met just drops down into it. For that you need a different type. Conversely, if you've got one which is pretty rigid, which has relatively small amount of movement, then you do want the U-pad. If it's got high flexibility, if the met heads can move really well independently of one another, what I would suggest you use is a modified met dome. Bog standard met dome, you can get these for sort of less than £1, and you just cut out almost like a heart shape, and you would glue that there. So the idea here is, because we've got that very high intermetatarsal stability, trying to lift that met up by lifting the ones around it isn't going to work, whereas coming behind it means that metatarsal will then be, relatively speaking, elevated next to its neighbours. So it's, instead of sort of dropping it down like that, we're actually pushing it up like that. But I'm not going to show you that one. I will show you the slightly more complex version, which is the U-pad. Now, please don't use semi-compressed felt. Semi-compressed felt is not designed for insoles. Apart from as a temporary stopgap, it just looks skanky and unprofessional and horrible. Bog standard pour-on, not that expensive, easy enough to get hold of. All I've done here is cut it to the sort of shape you would with felt, and I've beveled it with a pair of scissors, as you would with felt. You want your Dremel, and the attachment on the end there is a polishing mop. These things are absolutely brilliant. You can buy them on eBay, and they're very, very good for grinding through soft materials. So I'll just reposition the camera and I'll show you what to do. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to have this, instead of doing the classical thing and sticking it on the top where you've got all the ridges exposed, we're actually going to stick it underneath. We're going to have it like that. So that, and we're going to grind through there, so that it actually goes through into the softer material. So first thing we need to do is grind, medium to high setting, and you just hold this firmly. Try not to breathe. And what we get there is a nice, you can't really see on the video, but it's a nicely beveled, rounded edge cavity, which goes straight through the insole. Then we take our pad, which we previously cut to roughly the shape that we want it. We put it underneath. We mark where our cavity is, and we cut through the shape that we want, like that, and probably just a little bit of beveling just to help the base to stick. Now, if I was using my grinder, I could make this look a lot neater, but I'm not going to, because there's a lot of people that haven't got grinders, so we'll show you how to do it without. Okay, so then we have that. That is going to stick underneath there. So for this I'm going to use adhesive glue once again. It's well worth buying a thing of Renier Ortec, but bog standard spray glue works perfectly well. one other thing, 1 second. If you're using the pour-on which is shiny, which is not the abraded stuff, it's well worth just getting a little bit of sandpaper and just roughing the surface very slightly. You don't need to do that on the insole unless it's a glossy insole. If you're sticking it to something plastic, then by all means do that too. Just like so. So then we're going to get the spray glue. The bevel is obviously on the underside, so that will make sense in a minute. Okay, and we'll leave that set for a few seconds. So spray glue is not like Renier, you don't have to have it completely dry, but it's a good idea just to have it sort of touch dry. And then we will stick that into place thus. Tamp it all down, trim the edges, right, so we've got it underneath. The top side, apart from the cavity, is a lot smoother, and when you put that on the surface and actually press, obviously that goes through to the middle. That can't be issued like that, that looks horrible. So what we've got to do is cover it. Now what I'm going to use for this is EVA. That's just 1mm medium density EVA. This stuff is ridiculously inexpensive, it's really not at all dear. So I'm going to spray glue that. And with the spray glue you do have to do both surfaces. Leave that a few minutes to set. So there, I've just put that on. Make sure you squeeze it down into the heel cavity and into there. If it's cold, or if you want to get a really nice finish, and you are able to, heat gun, very useful thing. Give that a blast. What it'll do is basically soften the EVA, so the EVA will sit down better into the cavities. So we've got a nice smooth finish. Okay, so now I've just trimmed that round, and hopefully you can see that looks really quite neat. You can see the cavity in the top, and you've actually got the depth of the pour-on plus the depth of the material. So you've got about, oh, I don't know, 8mm, 9mm worth of cavity, which will do a really good job of holding that off. Having said that, we don't want to leave it there because that doesn't look very nice. That doesn't look very professional. So you could, at this point, simply stick another piece of EVA underneath. What I'm going to do is actually pop onto the grinder very quickly. So all I've done there is just tidied up the bevel a little bit with the grinder, smoothed it out. But if you didn't do that, the rest of the process would be exactly the same. Now we want to actually do the base cover. New piece of paper, and once again base cover is something that very often doesn't get done. It's not on show, it's not visible, but the patient can see it when they move it around in the shoe. More to the point, I know it's there. So it really is worth it. It doesn't take up any kind of room in the shoe. You can get this EVA in 0.75mm, I think even 0.5mm. So you're taking up a negligible amount of the room in the shoe, and the difference it makes to the look of the thing is huge. So there we go, nearly done. That's the underside, obviously that's the top side. So we've got our nice cavity in there, we've got our nicely beveled pad underneath. Cover and base cover. You'll notice I got a little bit of glue on the top cover there. That's a thing that happens, you can't avoid that. But it's dead easy to get it off. You just use your bit of sanding cloth or sandpaper at a pinch, and that just polishes that off. Likewise, you'll end up with some glue and bits and bobs around the side that don't look brilliant. Very quick rub over. Obviously if you've got a grinder you just flash it round on the grinder, but I'm assuming that we don't for most of this. There we go. If you give that to your patient, a few things. First of all, it's not going to go mouldy like a pair of felt and MeFix ones will. Secondly, it looks like something that's actually been manufactured. It looks like something that's been made. It is only a prefab orthotic with a few knobs and whistles and bells on it, but the patient can't go on eBay and buy this. I'll leave it to Jonathan to say how much he thinks you could sell that for, and I mean that's taken me what, 10 minutes, so cost that for us. I think Jonathan's got a course of some description, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, hopefully that's something that you can use. And that's what it looks like if you do have a grinder and you're able to just flash it through. This is not a big or expensive grinder, this is a sort of £40 from Machine Mart job. But yeah, that's how I would do an offloading pad for a corn on a 4th net head.